Okay. Anything from Facebook?
Nothing on Facebook yet.
Nothing on Facebook. So
Yeah.
what also triggered my thinking around this matter was also someone yesterday sharing that they are actually, sorry, no. They're actually missing the drive between me. They're actually missing the drive between office and work. And somehow that drive between office and work has always been there. Let me reconnect to home and let me disconnect from work and reconnect to work. And now that they don't have that hour or 10 kilometers that they're driving, they are really finding it's very difficult to set those boundaries between home. When does home start? When does work start? When does work end? When does home start? And this is one of the things that is almost like we are appreciating working from home, but these are some of the takeaways that we are so used to, and how are we then replacing those takeaways? And I like the idea of Tembela when she says she leaves her house and comes back with a fresh perspective. So on that note, I will hand over to Tembela, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, God, for that. Perhaps just to add on what Sko was saying earlier, I'm actually glad that you started by bringing up some of the issues that have come up in the past few weeks and months. I know that Scott didn't pick up on all of the things that have been coming up, but mostly on the ones that have come up last week. But perhaps I just want to add that when we look at today's session, the idea is that we want to move beyond talking into a space of action. When we met with a number of women, I think it was in fact, it was not even last year, it was a year before last, they were complaining that as women, we are so good at raising concerns about what is not working. And she was just so impatient and actually saying, can we just do something to change the things that are concerning to us? And of course, like the truth is that if we see that there are things that are not working for us as women, we cannot expect that other people are going to bring about changes that are going to work for us. So we've been talking with the World Health Company that it would be great if we could actually take these issues and run a campaign and also come up with an advocacy program where we are talking either to the industry leaders or we're talking to our employers so that we can actually change our world of work. And so I know that SCO has therefore raised the number of issues that we said were happening or things that we said we have observed in the past a few weeks or during the lockdown. So I'm not sure. I think at this point, what we would want to do is basically with that, I'm trying to invite us to say it would be really good if we could apply our minds into thinking about what are the priority issues that we could actually take up, both within our workplaces, but also as a collective as women. And then also be more clearer about our asks or like our demands. I know that other people normally say, no, don't use the terminology of demands because it looks like you're forceful and all that. But anyway, in simple language, you just want to come up with demands. So we've got the issues, we have to prioritize what are those issues that we can do or we can address. What is it that we are actually demanding? And then what is it that we can do together as a collective, as women? Now, because we're such a small group of people, and I also don't know how to divide people into groups, I don't know whether Nandi knows how to do that. Nandi, you can indicate to me whether you are able to do that. But anyway, I just want to throw that first a question. So we've been talking, when you think about all the things that we've been talking about, over these past months, what are those, what would we say are the priority issues that we should take up as women in a form of an advocacy agenda or a campaign where we will be talking around, where we'll be talking to other people to help us, address these issues. I just want to open the floor and hear whether people want to raise issues that we should be taking up. Can I invite, I don't want to put people on the spot because, like, I remember last week when we were having a conversation, somebody said, please, if you want me to be in this meeting, you just need to understand that I'm also listening to another call. So please don't pick up my name. So this is just an invitation. Anybody who wants to say something or to respond to that question. Okay. Whilst I'm waiting, I'll probably be naughty and actually move people into groups. We are quiet. I have taken the liberty to assign people into groups so that they can just discuss that first question. I don't know, are you in groups?
It hasn't done the separating thing yet.
Okay, let's see.
Now it's doing it.
Okay. I've never done it. I tried to do it before, but I didn't realize that you actually have to be in the meeting for us to be able to do that. So can we just discuss the question in our groups? Okay. The question is, what can we do? Or I'll put it in the group. What are the priority issues? Okay, so it's Alsmpo, are we the only ones? You are not allocated to any group? Let's see. What happened to the people in your group? Alsmpo, you need to accept the request to be joined into a different group. Yes. So, for the people that are on Facebook, we are asking the participants to discuss what are the advocacy issues that we should pick up as women, starting from now in August. We've been talking for the past few months since the beginning of the lockdown about women's experiences in the context of COVID. And we know now that we've tested what it means to be working at home or remotely. And also some of us have gone back to work. And so we know that people have observed new things perhaps they had not observed, either things that are sitting well with them or perhaps things that are not sitting well with them. And so we just want to know, if you were to think about all the issues that we've been talking about, so what are those things that we want to be addressing as women, both as individuals in our own workplaces, but also as a collective. So if you want to drop a response on Facebook, you can please go ahead and do that. So you can just write, and we'll find a way of making sure that we read and acknowledge your own responses as well. Just going to give ourselves 2 more minutes. So our friends, I can see that we have notices on Facebook. For those of you who are on Facebook, please, can you just reflect a little bit? Perhaps I can remind you some of the issues that were raised. So last week in the call, some of the things that we got to hear from the participants that were there was that women have actually noticed that when they look at the responses by their own organizations, the responses to COVID didn't speak to issues of gender-based violence. They also didn't speak to issues or the intersection between domestic violence and work. Some women also indicated that they have been forced to take up costs that belong to their own organizations. For instance, in this case, one example that was given was that you are asked to be carrying out work at home, and yet your own employer doesn't give you the tools to be able to carry out the work that they've asked you to do. And of course, the implication is that if you do not perform well, then you might actually find yourself being rated low and being told that you are not performing. Some of the interesting things that we have not even anticipated is the issues around online bullying, and including sexual harassment, where people begin to either they send messages to you or they want to call you in the odd hours of the day. Cindy, I can see you. I'm not going to allocate you into any group, so you can just listen and you can chat if you want. And also, like others were talking about humiliation, where somebody says something, and when you look at what this person had said, you actually realize that this doesn't sit well with me. And when you begin to dig, why is it that you're feeling the way that you are feeling, you actually realize that this person has actually taken the liberty to humiliate you in front of other people. And unfortunately, what we found was that a lot of workplaces don't have policies on online bullying or issues around sexual harassment in the workplace, or as somebody had said, I think earlier, that they always, or I think it was called, they always find that now there are no boundaries in terms of time. And these are things basically that have been coming up for a very long time throughout our discussions. So I'm just giving you time to just write your thoughts, and we will be opening up our group to hear what we have discussed. So for those who are on Facebook, today our session is more of a workshop style kind of a workshop. Or I mean a conversation. Cindy, are you connecting? I'll just give us 1 more minute and then we can come back. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm assuming that we are all back. How did that go?
We can't see you.
You can't see me. How can you not see me?
It's just my device that can see.
Let's just hear. I mean, it's the first time that in these sessions we're actually breaking people into rooms. So we just, and then also it's because of the nature of the issues that we are dealing with today. So how did that go? Did we manage to talk? Can we hear what was discussed in the group? Perhaps let me just ask group 1 to talk to us. I can't hear. Nkola, were you trying to say something?
No, sorry, no. My group, I don't know, maybe it was the fact that, we had 2 new members.
Okay.
And we're also very diverse.
Yes.
We spoke of, the various issues that women experience in the workplace and of course at home amid COVID-19, but we didn't really come up with any advocacy action point.
So you were not able to say what of those issues that we've been talking about, and perhaps the ones that SCORE had raised when she started. So you were not able to also say what we could be prioritizing as an issue.
No, we didn't. No, we couldn't. We didn't get to that.
Okay, tell us what you discussed, like in terms of the issues that you discussed. Perhaps you could just share a little bit with us what came up in that discussion, so that at least we don't leave the discussion just with the 4 of you.
All right. So anyway, I'll also ask Nandi to chip in. But what I was saying was, and I think I got disconnected as I was talking. What I was saying was, I work for the African Development Bank. It's an institution 60 years old, and once you join the bank, you hardly ever leave. So you tend to have a lot older people. People that have been to the bank 20, 30 years, and you'd find there are incidences of being being a young, quote unquote, youngish woman being overlooked for, you know, in meetings, in career growth, and also, you know, just being unable to have your voice because you have a lot of these older men. I was saying, you know, I have not experienced any violence per se because we have a very stringent anti-violence policy in the bank, and we have, you know, whistleblower policy. We have a staff association and a staff council. So you would not experience that, but you'd also, you know, what we experience, I would say, is probably subtle abuse, where, you know, if you're vocal, you know, you'll be told you're bossy, or you're difficult to work with, and things like that. And Nandi had mentioned something else. Nandi, could you contribute, please?
Okay. I mean, I think you've covered most of it, because we're talking about, you know, what are the ways that abuse and violations are moving from physical spaces to the online space. But I think over and above, it's how do workplaces have policies which are gendered in ways that are inclusive. So not looking at gender as a binary. So, you know, even during COVID or in any other time, do people who are in same-sex relationships, are they, do they benefit from the same kind of protections that heterosexual couples, you know, have benefits and other protections within organizations? Are people able to be, you know, fully themselves in the workplace? And what does that look like? So, yeah, so I think those are, so there are opportunities to advocate for seeing everybody in the workplace, and not particular, and not just particular groups of bodies within the workplace.
Thanks, Nkola and Nandi. So in the questions, I mean, that's actually quite helpful. In the questions that you were raising and reflecting on, what was the sense that you got from the discussion, or you didn't? Did you manage to get there in terms of saying this is what we've observed on those reflective questions that you were looking at?
No, we didn't get there.
Okay. Okay, so it might be good to, like, not just to the people that were in that group, but just to reflect a little bit more on those issues. What are our observations there? Yeah, thanks so much for that feedback. Just to remind people again that we are on live, so if you feel like if there's anything that you need to raise, you just need to make sure that you are a bit careful and know that we are on live. We don't want anybody who's going to be victimized because they are saying things and mentioning organizations in this space. Ngola, I hope that there are no people who are going to hear where you are working. Okay.
Whoops, I hope not.
We'll try and edit it. Okay. And can we get to hear from the other group? The people who were in the second group, can you share with us what you discussed? I'm trying to remember who were the other people in the other group. We had Alsmpo, Lati, Felicity, yeah, Ricky. Can we get to hear from that group?
Okay, I was in that group, but Paul was not in that group. It was Ricky, myself, and Felicity.
Okay.
Yes. So we spoke about issues of occupational health and safety as to how does the safety and policies that govern the office workplace almost extend to the home workplace. So that's an issue that we want to prioritize because it clearly is missing, and it has a direct link on productivity and the myth of work-life balance. So there's a connection there on that. Secondly, another issue that we want to prioritize is an issue around schooling and childcare. I mean, right now, some schools are not open, childcare facilities are not open, but work should continue. So who then fits in and hold that space when parents have to be working? So there's something around working parents that we have not really thought about in this lockdown process. And sometimes that also has issues of women thinking they might lose their jobs if they concentrate on the care of children rather than productivity at work. But who holds that place? And thirdly, it was the issue of mental wellness, particularly for women, because women have a tendency to hold, and we are socialized to learn to hold things. But when those things erupt, and they can erupt at any space, so how do we get to a place where the mental health wellness of women is actually becoming a priority in all the things that we're doing? And then the burden of care, which is household care and child care, goes back again to the issues around schooling and child care. And then, yeah, at the end of the day, all this has impact on the workplace and the workplace productivity. Yeah. Thank you. But my group members can also add if I left something out.
Group members, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. It was you, Ricky, and?
Felicity.
Okay, Felicity. Is there anything that was left out by Scott on your discussion? Nope. Okay? Well, I'm gonna ask Ricky to handle the second question, which has to do with, I mean, when we look at these things, what are the things that we can demand? But before Ricky comes in, it's actually interesting, Scott, that you discuss the issue of, I mean, the childcare as a priority issue, because I can remember when the president was making the announcement, he actually did allude to that in the fact that women will have problems with issues of children who now have to stay at home whilst you are working. But then there was no solution. It's like you decide what you want to do about your issues. But for us, we're just saying children must stay at home. And I know that even as I'm saying that, I know that there was a huge lobbying that the schools are supposed to close. I'm just referring to this particular time. But anyway, again, it is left to the parents to see to it, like how they deal with issues of childcare when they're also expected to be at home. I would, Scott, did you want to say something?
Yes, Tembela,
Okay.
because for me, that is very telling that the president said that, because then you can then see a very clear line that then goes to the Department of Labor when they do their regulations, because the Department of Labor should have then had a pronouncement on how then employers are expected to cushion women during this lockdown. Because remember, employers are more, they act on a directive. They don't act on what the president says. So there is now a gap that I can clearly identify. The regulations by the Department of Labor and Employment then missed to address the issue. And that issue was then supposed to be linked with ECDs, which are governed mostly by Department of DST. So there is exactly an issue there that is a big one in a way.
Yeah, yes, and I think it's an old problem, Score, where government, when it comes to its own policies, instead of looking at themselves as one system, you actually find that one department is working in isolation, yet the issues that they are dealing with are actually affecting other departments as well. So I'm actually, I can remember when I was working in the civil society sector that this was one of the big issues that we kept on raising. In fact, if you looked at the government documents, you'll actually find that this is something that they are also picking up. There is a serious problem, but they're not doing anything about it. Anybody else want to raise something else? There were issues that, I don't know, can we also have a little bit of a reflection on the issues that were raised by the first group, to just talk about what have we observed when we look at the policies that we have in the, even the responses that we have seen during this time of COVID. What kind of observations have we made in terms of who's catered for when it comes to the responses and who's left out? So I'm just inviting us, that group raise those issues. Any reflection that we want to make, any observations we have seen there? Nandi, from the people that you've been engaging with, what has been said?
Around, so
your group raised issues around gender policies, and so I don't know whether there are any observations like from the interactions that you've had about what people are observing.
No, so literally, like that was something that came up as we were talking here,
Okay.
because we're doing a lot of questioning when we were in the group.
Yes. Yeah. So I actually think it's one of the things, like in everything, whatever issues that we end up like focusing on in terms of advocacy, I think it's one of the things that we need to be looking at, but also because we have opportunities like in the next month and even after to be talking to different people, I think it's one of the things that we need to be mindful of and making sure that we're listening to all the voices. Welcome to the people that have just joined us. We are trying, well, basically what we are doing today, we're looking back at the issues that we've been raising over the past few months and basically trying to strategize as to what are we going to do about these issues, because it's one thing to be raising concerns, but it's another to be doing something about it. So we want to actually come up with an advocacy agenda for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we just want to influence the world the world of work, and make sure that it is responsive to who we are. If we do not have people who want to add on what we've just talked about, I would want us to go into the second group. I don't know whether, Ricky, you are ready for that. So as I'm talking, we've raised about 5 issues. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So Ricky, I don't know whether you want to take the second question, which is about, and perhaps you can also expand to it, what can we demand? So we're looking at all these issues that if we look at all these issues that we've talked about, what can we demand? Ricky, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
I'm here. Thank you, Tembela. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad that you could join us today. I'm going to apologize again for my video still not working. I will call it Lockdown Children Gremlins. But I'm so glad to be able to join with you guys today. So in the discussions we've had in the rooms before this, we've been prioritizing what are the big issues, what are the things that stand out the most to us and maybe stab us the most in our hearts, right? But knowing the issues that we want to address is quite different from, can they be crafted as an ask or a demand of our employers or maybe other people, right? Sometimes it is about what we ask for and what we demand in the workplace, and often the demands can be defined by our ability to point to rights that we may have, our ability to point to the benefits that the business may gain. So it's in that frame that we're thinking about demands. And the question that we're asking ourselves in our group discussions now is, what can we demand? But I want us to think a little bit beyond that. Not only what can we demand, but who do we need to demand it from? As we saw, group one's analysis was very much an analysis that was high level and order, and not necessarily the demands that you would make in the workplace alone. Although they are demands that define what is possible within the workplace. So that's the suggestion for the group discussions. 2 questions. What demands can we make based on these priority areas that must be addressed in the new normal? And who can we make these demands of? Does that make sense? Tembela, are you ready to divide us into groups?
Yes, that makes sense to me. So you have to accept the invitation. Perhaps let's move. So for those who are on Facebook and are following, I'm sure that you are wondering what's happening today. We've just gone into breakout rooms to discuss specifically what are the demands that we want to make, and to whom. So that we don't just sit here and complain about issues that are not working. So if you have any issue that you want to raise, please go ahead and do that. We will read what you have written and we will bring people back. Okay, so yeah, so now we will be together again. Are you still out? We're just waiting for the people in breakout room 2. Okay. Rick, we are at your hands. I don't know if there are people that we are missing. I know that Mkola had said she was gonna go into a meeting.
So are we doing a summary of what the 2 different groups discussed? If we can have just some feedback from group 1.
Group 1, I was told I am on my own when I do the fit. So I just need to disclose that. But I know they were just playing with me. They are going to be with me when I do the feedback. So what was very clear for us as one of the critical asks that we want is gender non-binary policies in the workplace. And we're asking this from anyone who employs everyone, because it's such a wide phenomenon that we only see through the binary eyes when we're doing policies in the workplace. And in particular, now that there's also movement of people, the recognition of same-sex marriages and the spousal benefits that come with it, and how those are actually even included, not as a favor, but as a basic human right that needs to be part of the package of benefits in the workplace. And also on top of that, the recognition of family units, irrespective of how those families are structured. And in South Africa, we are lucky that we also have the white paper on families that acknowledges all structures of families in their diversity. So we can leach onto that into us promoting the non-binary gender policies in the workplace. The second issue was around how women's mental well-being and wellness is actually intercepted by the phenomena of women being working parents, and also the assumption that as working parents, you could be working and having supports for that. So we also need to dissect that and say, it's working parents, fine, but in the working parents category, there are different categories. We could find single parent who have or do not have support at home, and what kind of support do you then put for those? For those that have support, what support do you then put? And the issue of child care is continuous and is actually almost attached even to the mental well-being of women, because you then have to kind of decide which one comes first. Is that one, do I excel at work? Do I excel at home? And the constant fatigue that women find themselves in because now of all these things that they have to be doing. So how do we do a holistic wellness response that takes into consideration the multifaceted roles that working parents in their diversity bring into the workplace? And now that workplace has then become home. So that's another added diversity or complexity, sorry, another complexity that has now been added into those realities. And Ulati actually said the support that we've already had, like there's a myth around the working parent who has support, because the only thing you were doing is to go to work. You had a nanny who does something else, you have helpers who do all these things. But now the reality is that all those supports have been taken away. So what she was actually saying is that when we then do an ask, it shouldn't be an ask just to acknowledge that things are done and it's done in a policy way, but it needs to also be done in a reality way, kind of a way we have a real conversation. And from that real conversation, we come with real tangible solutions or responses that are real, because now we know that without all these supports, how difficult it is to continue being a working parent. And then the last one is on home is no longer safe, and how do we ensure that home is safe, added with the complexities of work that has also come home. And these things are not going to be just finalized now, but we take them as an ongoing conversation that we can have until we get to a space where that continuum of safety exists between home and work and home. Yeah, so those were the issues, and I will ask from my fellow group members to fit in.
Claude did such an amazing job at summarizing. I did want to add to what Claude said, that as African women, doesn't matter where we live in the world, there's always that expectation that we need to be strong. And it's not even an expectation, it's the demands that are placed on us by family, by other women, by men, by children, that we have to be strong. And I think when we're putting together this document, before even putting out the demands to the world, it's really challenging ourselves to really understand, actually, what does it mean? Like, what am I happy to do without it being an obligation, without it being sacrifice, without me being in fear that if I don't get it done, it will rock the boat? Because a lot of the demands that we will put out there as African women is from the place of, this is the bare minimum that might make my life a little bit easier. But throughout COVID, I think a lot of us got to the point where it's a very weird breaking point, where we can pray for strength to be able to move forward, but it's a very new challenge in a way that you think, what is going on? Because you're holding the whole house together, you're holding the office together, and whatever happens, it's, you know, I'm strong, I need to move forward, I need to put my best foot forward, I need to just be. So it's really about that first layer of acknowledgement of what is it that's going on within us? What is it that we, from this experience, need to put down, that we've decided to pick up as bags to walk in this life that is not for us to carry, but we've been carrying for so long, we don't even realize it's not ours.
Thank you, Lati. Such a profound contribution, and I have to say very affirming, because I've really, I mean, that's been a huge challenge for me, and it's landed me asking hard questions like, and I heard Sklo asking the same question earlier, do the kids really have to be as clean as used to them having to be, because I realized that left to my devices, the life that I was living was in fact a 72-hour life that I was squeezing into a 24-hour day. And so those realities as well are realities we must take into place. I'm afraid you're going to be hearing quite a bit of my voice, because my group also said I have to report back, and I was in group 2. But the good thing is that we were on the same page as group 1 in a lot of ways. I think the only thing that was different is we were talking about what kind of internal processes have to happen in an organization to enable the kind of initiatives that group 1 is talking about. And so we were talking about the need for a very clear leadership commitment, the need for internal spaces and consultation spaces so that you can understand the circumstances and the reality of women employees, and the need for training and support across the organization, but especially at leadership and management level, because your managers are the people who are putting pressure on you, not understanding the reality that you're having to face and cope with. But that also led us into a discussion about how important it is to even train and support managers and leadership, because it is a new normal for them as well. And so a demand that we have to recognize this new normal for what it is. And it is a new normal that has demonstrated that they are unrealistic demands of women in the workplace. And so we have to be able to negotiate how to live as human beings in a context where there is no longer a divide between workplace and home. That also led us into a discussion about the violence, because one of the issues I raised is, I remember in one of our earlier sessions, really the conversation we had about the reality of I as a woman can show up in all the ways that I do, but my partner is right there doing his work, making demands, and never lifting a hand to support, and in fact making additional demands. In our group, they said, you know, now somebody who you never had to figure out lunch for is expecting you to make lunch, and doesn't understand that you have to do work, and how this creates a context where violence now can become a lived reality. And not only a lived reality in your home, but now also in your workplace, which is the same place that is home. So all these complexities of the new normal and how we have to realize that. So one of the demands we thought was important was to be able to demand that even our partners in our homes, and especially when they are when we're in heteronormative homes. So when there are partners that are male, that they understand that there is a new normal, and they also have to interact differently in a new normal and show up and support and in the household, instead of simply make demands in the household. I don't know if I left anything out of our group, but Paul and Kola can add.
The other thing is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The other thing is, we talked about guidelines, that there needs to be standard operating procedures which we can follow when we draw up policies in our workplace. Thank you.
I'm actually wondering, like, listening to Ricky and the one around partners, I'm actually wondering, perhaps in future, the discussions around contracts and all that might actually have to be, before you can sign into any contract, it has to be something that is negotiated first at home, because no, like right now, when there's a contract I just signed,
Oh my God,
you know, you can't hear me.
No, I can
you can't
hear
hear me. Okay, so I'm just saying what an interesting thought in my mind is that at this point, you know, like when you are negotiating a working contract, normally this is something that is just between you as an individual and your employer. And now this whole thing that we are seeing, that the space for work and home is the same space, basically, it might actually be forcing us, before I can or my partner can take up a contract, it might actually force the whole household to be engaged so that we are able to reach that kind of an understanding. Alison, were you saying something? Ricky?
So we're going to move on to our last session, and this session is a session about what can be done. So we now have an idea of
connection. Yeah.
Yeah, someone is struggling with connection. Can I please ask that you mute, or Tembela, can you mute? So
I'm not able to mute her. I don't know how come it's not allowing me.
Yeah, it may be the matter of connection. So I'm going to ask the other participants to bear with us until we can resolve that. The last session that we wanted to have was a section about, so what can I do? And what can be done collectively? We've talked about some of the areas that need to be addressed. We've talked about who needs to take responsibility for addressing those areas. And now we want to talk about what can we do as individuals in our workplace, and what can we do collectively, and maybe what does that collective look like? Is it women together? Is it women together in one workplace, or is it women across workplaces? Is it women and men together? So that's the session we're going to go into now. Tembela, I'm thinking that our numbers are fairly small, so can we just have this discussion in this space without breaking into smaller groups?
I was actually thinking of that as well, Ricky. Perhaps we can start with one question in terms of what can we do collectively.
All right, so can we have some reflections on what can we do collectively?
I think something that is very powerful collectively is being there to be sounding boards and honest sounding boards for each other, because it's very much, if we have to face the world, if we haven't had the sponsorship or the support or the advocacy from other women, we can stand in a place where we're not in our strength on a mental health perspective point, or even from a physical perspective point. Because very often, if you're suffering and you feel that you're suffering alone and you feel that you're isolated, it's very difficult to gather the strength to be able to move forward. But if you're in a situation where you are experiencing very unique challenges, but you can see other people are, but they are finding different ways to create space within themselves so they can cope and create a bandwidth. There's so much power in the openness around it and the lack of judgment. So a really good starting point could be that open conversations as a way to really band together.
Thank you, Lati. So the value of having these kinds of conversation spaces, right? What are some of the other things that we can do collectively? So I want to reflect that I said to Tembela, this would be the hardest question to answer. There she is nodding her head. And the reason is that traditionally, for some reason, it is not considered, traditionally, for some reason, people don't consider themselves as able to be activist or able to be demanding in the workspace, especially the professional workspace. And so I want us to kind of talk about that and what that means, because the reality is, if we are not raising these issues, if we are not finding ways to make these demands, they won't be addressed. There's article after article about what are the negative impacts of COVID on women. And there's article after article on what it means for the working future of women, but there's also no actions or very limited actions to change. So without us articulating in one way or the other, we're not going to see results. So maybe the question that needs to be asked is that why is it so hard for us to see ourselves as doing the work to bring the change?
Because it's time. It's time away from the family. It's time away from keeping the families together, because women are the glue. And as much as we want to be able to be advocates for the nation, it is something that's, it is a choice that you will sacrifice something. And if you're in this place where it's a very new space, you're still getting used to the constraints of it, because it is very new. 120 days is not something that's been there long enough that we've built up the muscles and the resilience to be able to go forth. Conversations like this about our mindset to get to the place that we can be there, but it's just about keeping body, mind, and soul together, keeping the kids together, making sure that we can get at least one shower a day. But sometimes the struggles are very small and basic, but it's a big difference.
I think that's really good to know that that the issue is it's yet another demand on already an already strained.
Can't hear you. Oh, I think Ricky is trying to connect into another device. But perhaps Ricky is trying to connect. That is actually quite important, and like what you are saying. I remember, I think it was last year, one of the things we were talking about was exactly this thing of saying, how do we make sure that we find ways of raising our own issues without having to take so much of our time. And so I think at that time we're even thinking about like online, and now in a way we have this opportunity to be actually connecting and talking to one another online. And then actually wonder whether it's possible for us to give ourselves those permissions to can say, I will make this time, whether it's an hour or it's 90 minutes. I mean, it doesn't have to be every day. I'm actually wondering as well, in terms of saying, what are the permissions we need to give ourselves as women so that we are able to influence the changes that we want to see. And because nobody's going to do this for ourselves, whether we're talking about home or whether we're talking about the workplace, we are the ones who are feeling the pinch. You are saying we are the glue of our families. Should it be that way? Are the adjustments, for instance, that we can actually make in the home front as well, so that we are able to free ourselves to do that which we need to do? And I think going back to what Ricky was saying, I think for me, one of the compelling things that make me to want to do this is because I'm not just thinking about myself, I'm also thinking about about the future generations, like our daughters. Yeah, anyway.
Hi, I made it onto the screen. Yeah, so I think that what Lati was saying is essential. And I think that it's healthy to recognize that I just don't have any more energy for that. But that doesn't take away the fact that some of this work has to be done. So maybe the questions we need to be asking ourselves is, so who can do this work? And how can we support this work in ways that are not stretching us further, right? So I say that because being in this discussion is part of doing this work. The reason Womaniko has set up this space is for us to really find some of these answers and to journey with women who are living these experiences in finding some of these answers. But the other thing that I thought was valuable with what Lati said is that it's not time, that maybe we need to give ourselves more time. We need to walk longer. We need to realize that the strain is heavier. And I think recognizing those truths really helps us as an organization that does want to do that kind of advocacy, know how to engage and where to engage.
Thank you for saying that, Ricky. But I think I really like what yourself and Tembela brought out. And I just want to kind of give it another side, because it may have sounded like I was being negative. So if we look at major changes that have happened in the world, let's just look at South Africa, for example. Broadband came in the 60s. It was the worst kind of like most institutionalized racism, and it has oppressed most of the Black people. It took multiple years of struggle, multiple years of people sacrificing lives and time and everything before we brought about a change in '94. But even that change wasn't something, it was more symbolic in terms of legal changes. But the actual attitudes of people, still today, you can see that it pervades people's mindset, because you can change the law, but attitudes and mindset cannot change. If we look at now the women's movement and giving people equal rights, equal space, equal consideration, this has been there since the beginning of time. You can read in Genesis 3:16, and it talks about how women will be dominated by their husband and her craving will be for them. So since the beginning of time, this women argument has been there. So we're not fighting something similar to like, apartheid, which has been there since the 60s. This is something that is deep rooted in every single system in the world. And it serves the way the world is set up. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there to kind of fight for bits and pieces of ground, but it's really understanding what it is that you're fighting against. It's a juggernaut, something that pervades every single part of the culture and every single system that is out there. So as a result, it's about understanding that it's chipping away, but getting so many women on board to chip away with it until you're one strong force that can tip that scale. And similar to what Tembela was saying is the fact of, I'm not just thinking of me, I'm thinking of my daughters. But that thought, similar to tipping over the whole idea of the racism mindset for white South Africans, which that work hasn't been done in the rehabilitation, is rehabilitating ourselves so our daughters can see, well, mommy didn't teach me that. So if I'm trying to fight for a fight, but I come home and I'm like, all of those different things, you want tea and all of those, and but I'm out there saying, no, women's right. But in the house, I'm not showing that I can still be respectful to my, my partner, because it's part of our culture. But I'm showing my daughter that it's not from a submissive, subservient, sacrifice everything that there is, throw yourself on the ground so you can walk all over your way. So it does have to begin with us, where we challenge ourselves and say, well, I've been in the situation in COVID that I did let everything give and I was holding it together. But how can I bit by bit reclaim back and say, is it okay you get your own tea? Is it okay that you do this with the children? And it's not fighting or being aggressive. It's in our own feminine way, using what we are as women, the power that we have to create space for ourselves, to create that beauty that we have, because we have that power, but a lot of it has been stripped away. That authority has been stripped away. And it's a lot of careful thinking that may seem like nothing is moving, but it's so powerful when we, as a group, collaborate to say, listen, this is who we are. Let's enjoy our essence. Let's do what we need to do, but not in the way that men do things, where it's, we have to work, we have to put down it. There's a way we will change this, but as women, not in a masculine way.
Thank you, Lati. I'd really love to hear the thoughts of Jabulile and Spo on this conversation that we're having. I'm also conscious of time. We're scheduled until 6:30, Tembela. Yes?
Yes, Vicky. So we left with 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear the thoughts of Spo and Jabulile, and then I'm gonna close us out.
I think for me it's real what Ulati is sharing, and I think it also goes to what we've been grappling with, saying that the workplace anyway was never created for women to be part of. And some of the things that she's raising really are from that perspective. And then also, it then calls for us to say in the asks that we have said we want to prioritize and we want to demand, we need to then segment them in immediate, short-term, long-term, and forever. Because also his research does tell us that we won't see gender equality in our lifetime, maybe in the lifetime of our great-grandchildren. So, but it's about what Tembela was saying, chipping small steps now that might contribute to bigger things in the future, and being mindful that, yes, of course, some sacrifices must be made, and those sacrifices shouldn't take away who we are and what defines who we are. So if we sacrifice, it shouldn't be at a point of death, but it should be at a point of still being mindful and being kind to oneself and those around us. Yeah, so that's what I will just say.
Thanks, Go. Jabulile. Oh, Angel, please speak. We can't hear you, Angel. It shows that you're speaking, but we can't hear you.
And I'm sorry, it was unmuted by mistake. So sorry.
Okay. So you don't want to contribute to this discussion that we've been having this evening? Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I'm going to close this out, being mindful of time and the many pressures that we're carrying, and hearing those little people in the background. I think that we have done an immense amount of work today. And for us, the aim was for us to really get to grips with what does it take to move away from just the discussions amongst ourselves on what the problems are, to discussions on what are the solutions and who's responsible for those solutions and what can be done to aim for and reach for those solutions. I think the most meaningful part of the discussion today was that recognition that we still have quite a long way to go, and that recognition that there's so much work that we have to do for ourselves. So these spaces remain the valuable spaces where these discussions need to happen. But what I do want to say is part of the biggest problems of COVID-19 is not so much that we can think about new gains, is that we also have to prevent the losses of the last 20, 30 years of gains of women in the workplace. So we don't want to step back in time. And so I think that a solidarity approach has to be an approach that is not necessarily burdening the self with more work, but holding hands with the people who are doing that work or are able to do that work, because we all do different things, right, in different kinds of work. So how do we lend credence and lend support and integrity to the people who their energy is there for carrying the battle forward, or for putting up the ramparts to protect the gains that we've made in the past. And that support can look like many things. It can look like this is a language that is comfortable for where I am right now. It can look like here's my signature. It can look, it can look like the small things and not necessarily the big things of tackling activism. And I think that's, for me, it's very valuable to hear that, because it's something that we've struggled quite a lot with at Womanical. But how do we get more activism in this space? So I want to thank everybody who joined us on the call, everyone who contributed to the discussions, everyone who reminded us how very, very big these issues are, and how very, very big they are in our own homes that we still have to live with in everyday situations. I want to thank Sko and Tembela for holding the space. I was supposed to have done a very nice video for you, and guys, my video is very nice, but it was my first video and it stressed me out, and it still hasn't reached Tembela. So maybe we'll share it with you next week. I just wanted to remind you on going forward that we have started the Dare to See Us campaign, which is about leveraging of positive stories of corporates and businesses that are responding to the needs of women in order to raise awareness about what those needs are. So we're wanting to hear the good stories of what has happened, what has your company done to show that it takes you seriously and is conscious of the challenges that you're facing as a woman in the workplace in the COVID context. And we'll be sharing this and building a campaign and building towards a report at the end of the month that talks about both the challenges and some of the best practices of responses from companies. We also have a survey that we're sending out that is helping us to really deepen the knowledge so that we have a valuable product at the end of the month that adds value to every corporate, every organizational space that will receive it. And all of this is linked to the advocacy work that we're talking about, because it's linked to some of the responsibilities that companies have. And it's linked to the fact that we're not just the glue of our families. We also, as women, are the glue of society, especially in an African context. Development happens through women. So we also can't allow women to fall out of the workplace and to fall out of income generation. And so what does advocacy look like, both in what work must be done and actually what can we manage with all that we're holding? Next week, Thursday, we'll be launching the campaign officially, although it's already hit the social media spaces, and we're looking forward to having you join us and to having a conversation about what a Dare to See Us campaign is and what we need to be doing. Thank you so much for making the time today. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. We will actually send the information as well to your emails about the campaign as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, good night. You can go, Chabu. Oh, live. Live. She's here.
Where is Togan?
Wait, let me stop the recording.